There we go. All right. Welcome to our presentation this evening. It is September 2024 rules for LPC, LMFT, and social work. And I will share my screen. And while I'm doing that, Dr. Stevens, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Stevens. I am an industrial and organizational psychologist and social worker for the past about 15 years, working with Kate Walker on a couple of different things. So stay tuned for all the exciting things we have coming up for you in the future. But very happy to be here, and hopefully you won't just know me as the rules lady. I do a lot more than that, so don't just think of me as the BHEC social work person. But if you have any questions about anything related to social work, the rule book, BHEC, happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Please check your screen and make sure that you can see the PowerPoint. That is not what I really wanted to share. I actually wanted to share a portion of the screen. It's not cooperating. Surprise, surprise. So we'll go with plan A. And when I do these presentations, if you've heard me do these presentations before, I always emphasize, please know who you're listening to, right? This is a really important presentation if you're here for the rules, which I know you are. So this is not a vanity slide. This is so that you understand that we have done our very, very best. We love research, we love the rules, and we love bringing them to you. So if you have any questions, we'll show you how to reach out and ask us questions as well. Now, the ground rules for the presentation are, we are not attorneys and we are not your supervisors. So if you want the PowerPoint, and this PowerPoint is going to have teeny tiny writing on it, so you're going to want the PowerPoint because there's a lot of this stuff you're going to look at and you're going to squint and you're still not going to be able to see it. We will be happy to send the PowerPoint if you are getting a certificate. We're not going to post the PowerPoint on social media. So if you want the PowerPoint, you get it when we get you your certificate. If you want the replay, I'm recording it tonight, and members of Step It Up, you guys are going to get the replay. Everyone else, you're just going to have to wait till we do this again. And you know we'll do this again, so don't stress. We will probably do it again in the spring because the 4-year rules review is happening. So we're likely to see lots of changes in the next 6 months or so. All right, we already talked about CEs. Now the agenda for tonight, we're going to start with how to find everything. We'll talk about negligence. We'll give you a little background. And what we've tried to do tonight, and Ashley and I talked about this a couple of times, we want to give you a side-by-side, the best that we can. Now, as we're putting the PowerPoint together, it falls apart eventually because the changes just don't line up all nice and pretty like we want them to. So if you have your chat open, which I hope you do, I will try to keep an eye on that. So if Ashley's talking about something, I'm going to catch the chat. If I'm talking about something, Ashley can catch the chat. Please, please ask questions with the chat while we're talking. I want this to be interactive, and I know there's a lot of confusion because I see the threads and I watch what everybody posts about CEs, about rules, about changes. And everybody, I know you guys want to do the right thing. So there are no silly questions. We just want to make sure everybody has what they need to do a good job. So, okay, I see some people posting their names in the chat. We're not going to take attendance from the chat, y'all. I'm going to have my assistant, Ryland. He hasn't posted the link yet, but he will. I promise he will. So you will need to fill out the Google form. All right. So I don't want to give you a false sense of security there. All right, so how do you get to know exactly what Ashley and I know? You sign up for emails. You go to the BHEC website and you sign up for the emails, and you will find out exactly what we find out as it's happening. The board has gotten so wonderful about keeping everybody up to date. You go to the website, the links are hot, they're live. You go and you grab the things that you need. And if you want to go to the TAC, I find this super cumbersome. You guys recognize this sort of blue background, and it just, to me, it doesn't read very friendly. So what I do is I go to the BHEC and website and I download the PDFs. The PDFs are much easier to search. You can also belong to one of our outstanding statewide organizations, TCA, AAMFT, the Social Work Organization, and even informal community groups like the Texas Supervisor Coalition or Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses. We will get you information. You will be able to download so much excellent material from the BHEC website. And they even have lunch and learns now. So if this is news to you, I highly recommend that you go to the lunch hour. You know, you can sit and talk with the attorneys, you can talk with staff, you can talk with all those people that you're so frustrated with, but are really just trying to do a really good job. And I do not work for the board. I don't represent the board. I've been doing this, and Ashley's been doing this for a decade. And so this is a huge, huge, wonderful, positive change. So briefly, let's talk about negligence. And just FYI, I'm planning on 1 CE for you guys, but if we go over a little bit, I hope you're okay with that, and we'll give you the CE accordingly. So negligence happens when you break a rule. Well, how do you know it's happened? There has to be a special relationship. So if you're the counselor, that's the consent form. If you're the supervisor, that's that paperwork you mail into the state that says, hey, I'm a supervisor now. There has to be some kind of breach of duty. So you took action that was unnecessary, like you had sex or you did drugs with your client. The action was necessary, but you didn't take it, like you should have reported to CPS, but you didn't. Or you took it at the wrong level. You reported to CPS to your boss instead of reporting to CPS. So injury, there has to be some harm to someone, and it has to be tied back to you, your action, or your omission. So the umbrella of rules that you hear about as a practitioner range from federal laws like HIPAA and FERPA to state laws like the TAC laws, the Family Code, House Bill 300, professional organizations. Anybody heard of the ACA Code of Ethics? I mean, people think those are rules. They think those are laws. They're not. They are our code of ethics, and that is designed by the American Counseling Association, and lots of organizations have that. And then your job, and then of course your own moral compass, because it really comes down to what do you feel is the right thing to do. When there is no rule, we develop best practices, and that's what groups like this are all about. We talk about these rules. We talk about those big gaping loopholes that seem to want to snare us, and we develop best practices based on research, based on what our colleagues are doing, what's working, and we talk to attorneys like Kenda Dalrymple and Michael Flynn and Laurel Clement, who say, yeah, that's a pretty good thing to do. So just another list of federal laws. Like I think a few people, a couple of years ago, were asking, well, why hasn't the LPC board talked to us about the No Surprises Act? Well, it's because it's a federal law. Our licensing boards don't concern themselves with federal law, or they don't govern that, right? They include that like HIPAA, right? But they're not going to govern that. And labor laws, like why don't they tell us how to do 1099 or W-2? Because it's labor law. It's not under their jurisdiction. This is a list of state level rules. Now, I promise you we're not going to give you a long history lesson, but it's important to know where some of these things came from. If you have been in this presentation before and you're like, oh gosh, Kate, please not again, feel free to hit your mute button now. It's okay, because it's history. It hasn't really changed much. But now we get to add social work. So this is what's so cool. You kind of get to see how social work has morphed right alongside LPC and LMFT. So I'm going to put my glasses on. And so brief history, sunset review happened, which coincided with a rules review. The boards met. When I say boards, I mean LPC, LMFT, social work, and psychology. And all of them agreed, and the governor did too, to form BHEC, the Behavioral Health Executive Council. Now, what's important to understand is there's no hierarchy. Like the BHEC isn't the boss of the member boards, right? BHEC administers the member boards. The member boards, LPC, LMFT, social work, and psychology, still have the power to determine things like their scope of practice and who gets in trouble for what and what the consequences are and how to apply and what the academic standards are. So you will see in our presentation tonight changes specific to BHEC, changes specific to LPC, LMFT, and social work. All right, that doesn't mean one supersedes the other. In fact, they do a pretty good job of aligning. And that's been an issue every once in a while. So I've got my chat open. Any questions so far just about the establishment of BHEC or sunset or any of the terms that I've talked about, federal versus state? No surprises, no silly questions. Anything, we good? All right, off to the races. Here we go. So 27 to 2019, when Ashley put this on the PowerPoint, you know, because we're sharing it on a Google Drive, I was like, oh, wow, everybody just kind of did the same thing. So, Ashley, anything you want to add here?
Sure. I'll just say, as we go through this, what you'll see is some flip-flopping. So if one side says took limits off of these things, and then you see in the next year or 2 years from there, it put it back on. It might have taken it right back off. So don't get confused about the constant flip-floppery. 2024, we've got you when it comes to like what are the current state of things. And spoiler alert for when that comes, a lot of these things have been removed, some of the restrictions. So they were removed in 2017 through 2019, and you'll see them come right back and then they'll go away again. So
no confusing there, no confusion. This is the year that they said anybody can be a CE provider, right? I still see that in our threads. What are the criteria? How do I become? What do I need to do to, can my associate be? And the answer is yes. Yes, all of it. And even put the 50% rule aside, everybody and anybody can, not everybody should, but they can. Also, I want to put limits, let's see, limits on the time you can apply. Okay, this one here I think is important. I knew it was going to do that. I just heard last week that someone thought the board was re-adding a requirement for in-person CEs. So the comment was something like, yeah, someone told me they need to sign up for a conference because we have to do face-to-face CEs again. That is incorrect. All right. When the limits were removed on CEs for technology, what is determined, this actually what we are doing right now is a face-to-face CE. Okay. So there is no difference between sitting in a room with us and sitting at the end of your keyboard with us. All right. Ashley?
all right. So social worker who uses technology in the provision of social work services, back in 2017, 2019, there was a requirement, like you'll see in LMFT. We mirror LMFT quite often. So you'll see that kind of, yeah. LPCs are off, you know, y'all are doing your own thing, but us and LMFT were pretty similar in a lot of things. We did have to have 15 hours of continuing education initially to get your supervisor distinction, and then 2 years every single subsequent renewal period. And this was on top of the hours that you needed, your 30 hours for your biannual review. So that used to be the case.
That's a lot. And MFT was the same. This was the year we saw the board trying to pave the way for our associates to be seen more as professionals. So you saw the word temporary license go away. We saw the term distance counseling removed, which is so interesting to me because that's actually before COVID. And all of these limits were taken away before COVID. So it's interesting. All right. Any questions about 2017 to 20? Well, let me keep going. Ashley, anything you
Yeah.
want to add here?
So the limits on the online 40-hour training were removed. So number one, that any part of that, there was back then, there was a certain percentage of this has to be face to face, live, those kinds of things. You can't do the full social work supervisor course to get your supervisor distinction online. Now that was removed in back then. And then also was the 40-hour course. You had to, like, if you took it today, you only had a 2-year clock started from when you could request. So if something happened, you took the course and then you didn't have the ability to pay for the upgrade, or you forgot to do the paperwork or whatever, if it was 2 years after when you took it, you would have to take it again if you didn't get that supervisor distinction. So that was removed in these years.
This was the year for LPC that they removed the criteria or the number of years to keep intern records. We get asked that a lot. How long do we have to keep our intern paperwork? Back then it was intern, now it's associate. It was removed here. This is where site limits were removed, right? Board doesn't care how many sites or where the supervisee sees clients. They put that on us, right? Supervisors are responsible for that. And this was when the 40-hour course could be completely online. And this is the year that they took away the LPC associates' ability to roll over any graduate school hours toward their direct hours. All right. Any questions about 2017 to 2019? Is it all lining up? All right, here we go. 2020. BHEC. And it's all that I told you it would be, right? Y'all can read that. Each of the boards, each of the boards, each of the boards. So it makes it very clear that each board, they have to communicate, right? It's a, I don't know, there's nothing like it in the country. The Behavioral Health Executive Council is really unique to Texas. So I think it's a really cool thing to have. If you're interested in how the boards, the rules are organized, when you download the PDF, this is what it looks like. And you see in the upper right-hand corner, this tells you the version that you have. And for those of you keeping score, they released a new version last week. So the first 5 sections are BHEC. The 6th section will be your member board. And this is for everybody. This is LPC, LMFT, and social work and psychology. And then sections 7 and 8 are other laws. So if you ever wonder, okay, what's the family code on that? And you're a supervisor, you can send your associates here. I think this is great. Now, one thing that did change and a few folks did not see, and this was in 2020, you know, that notice in your consent form, it changed. So that's for clients who want to file a complaint. For your clients who want to file a complaint, they need to have the contact information. They have to have this. So if you never switched this out of your consent paperwork, you got to do that. Also, this is when they added fingerprinting. This is when they added taking the sex trafficking course. They added the background checks, the verification of citizenship, and this is where that happens. So I know there's a lot of confusion about, okay, do I have to take the sex trafficking course every time? Do I have to get fingerprinted every time? And that answers that. Oh, goodness, I just saw we have the link. Everybody look in your chat. There's the link so you can fill out the form if you need the CE. Take a second and click that link. You don't have to fill it out now, but you'll have a tab open like the rest of us. You can have 8 million tabs and keep that open after the presentation. All right, now the flip-flopping. All right, Ashley. Go ahead.
Your first flop. So re-added the 2 years from when you took your supervision course that you had the clock started, you had those 2 years. And of course, during this period, we wanted everyone, as soon as you finish that course, go ahead, pay the fee, get that upgraded so you don't have to worry about it. But that did get reinstituted. And then the supervisor CEs, they shifted that a little bit. So the supervisor status, if you had that status and you wanted to keep it, you had to do 6 additional hours of continuing education, specifically in supervision, every 2 years. And then this was a really interesting thing. We are one of, I believe we're up to 5 states in the entire country, where they shifted over to when you go to take the licensing exam for your supervisees or people who are currently LMSWs working on their clinical hours, they had to apply directly through the ASWB website rather than call and start the process with the board. So that was a huge change that we're still doing now. We're one of very, very few states that do it. So a little bit of an odd duck situation there.
LPC and LMFT, you can see the same flip-flops happening with LPC. LMFT pretty significant. We saw the reduction of the LMFT relational hours from 750 to 500 because it was just so dang hard to get. And then, of course, coinciding with COVID, getting a family hour was really hard via technology. And then the LMFT CE, yeah, they were starting to do some things with CEs, but you'll see it all evens out in the end. So if you're an LMFT and you're looking at that and you're going, what? Don't worry about it, because in a few more slides, you'll see it all works out. You notice LPCs, I'm going to draw your attention to the LPC associate. Everybody's like, well, where in the rules does it say we have to spell out associate? It's not that it says you have to spell it out. It's that there is no mention of an LPCA. All right. So you will see in the rules, you may refer to yourself as this, you may refer to yourself as that. And for supervisors, you guys know this because it'll say LPCS. Nowhere in the rules does it refer to an A. Okay, so just be aware of that. Just because it's not written, it's sometimes the omission that gives us what we need to know. All right, before I move on, any questions about 2020? All right, speeding along, here we go. 2021. Now they just went through and they started getting rid of the term board, right? It's kind of like they got rid of the term facts. So now we have board instead of or council instead of board. So council approved, council approved. They got rid of the renewal card. Staff says there's no way we're going to be auditing 10% of the licensees. And they listened and they reduced it to 5. What is this? What is the plan? Ashley, what is that? That always intrigued me.
Yeah, so social work is a little bit weird here too. Back but prior to 2021 era, we had to get a supervision plan approved by the board before you could start collecting your hours from LMSW to try and attempt to go for your LC. So the 3,000 hours that you need over the no less than 2 years, that initially got started, that process, by a board approved supervision plan. Well, in this day and age, still to this day, this is the case. You start working on a form. There's 4 little check boxes that you keep logs, that you have a job description, those kinds of things. But that form doesn't get turned in until you go to upgrade from LM to LC, which means that everyone likes to conveniently forget that it exists until they scramble at the very end going, I got to get a letter from my employer saying that my external supervisor is okay to talk about confidentiality. It's a little bit of a mess, but nothing, you need to be under supervision to start the process, but you don't have to have anything approved by the board to start the process, which honestly is like no other state I've seen.
And how many states are you licensed in?
I'm currently licensed in 9. I've been up to 11, and I supervise in 5 of them.
So good perspective. All right. And that was it. There were no changes to LPC, LMFT. I guess they all just took a big break because COVID, right? So no major changes to LPC and LMFT in 2021. So here we are, 2022. So COVID passports were a thing, and that's still in the rules. They said no passport questions, no, if your client came in face to face, you couldn't ask them if they had been vaccinated. Ashley, we got a question in the chat. Is there a sample supervision plan? Okay.
Yeah, so I believe in kind of citing all of my work so you don't just think I'm kind of speaking out of my own brain. So I'm gonna find the exact rule that says this, but an LPCS can supervise a social worker like at work. But if you have an LMSW who's hoping to gain their hours for LCSW, an LPC can't supervise them. That's a question we get a lot. And I know that's not exactly what you're asking here, but there is a form on the board's website that is the supervision plan. As we know with Kate Walker Training, there's all sorts of other things that we talk about that aren't provided by the board. Orientation, actually a contract that we do with our supervisees, but there's one just really quick and easy form on the board that has basically just they sign their information. Here's 4 quick little check boxes of things to get kind of saved on your file for your supervisee and then assign. So it's not robust, but there is a form on the board website. I will link you to that.
Awesome. All right, 2022. Ashley, want to go, or do you want me to skip to LPC LMFT while you're Googling?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so this was the year that the associates, the shot heard around the world, right? So the associates went to the board and as an organized body, and they said, hey, look, what's happening here really is not fair. And the board's attorney agreed. We're in Texas. Anybody can own a business. So the law or the rule changed in 2022. LPC associates can own a business. They are shared. The liability is shared with their supervisor. They defined independent practice as practicing without a supervisor. Not the way the IRS does it, independent contractor, right? This is independent practice. So you have to remember to take both of those words. And they said for us supervisors, you must have a record of acknowledgement in the supervisee file if they are self-employed, or in other words, on their own practice. LMFTs were inching toward being a little bit kinder because of COVID and the fact everybody was accruing hours. All the associates were accruing hours via technology. So they gave a way for them to go over the 500 cap on their direct hours. And if there's a governor mandated disaster, and that's gotten better too. So stay tuned. And then,
so we simplified some rules about gaining supervised experience. And this was the introduction of the 4 hours per week. So what the rules actually say is if you work in a non-clinical setting as a LMSW, you only have to get 4 hours of clinical practice, direct practice, and that is, the definition is in the rule book, but only 4 hours per week. And then all of your hours can count towards that 3,000 limit. So what this means is that for our social work friends who are pursuing their clinical license, not all of their 40 hours a week have to be in that face-to-face. It gives a little bit of a break for all of those people who are doing clinical case management or some of the other types of employment, not therapy all day, every day for 40 hours a week, which is great. The initial, you see these 2 years a lot. Back then, they were requiring that if you took and passed the National Clinical Social Work exam, you had 2 years in order to upgrade your license, or else you had to start over, which is absolutely kind of insane. And then this one is a big one and a huge difference from LPC. Um, LCSW, our rule book says that they can own a business, asterisk, huge asterisk, but they can't be independent and it can't be clinical and it has to be supervised unless you get an independent practice recognition, IPR. So that's a huge question we get all the time. Can provisionally licensed LMSW social workers own their own business? Yes, doing something other than clinical social work. And then lastly, they removed the 48 and 60-month maximums for completing your supervised experience. You can actually take now as long as you need. And those differences, 48 hours, you had up to 4 years to get your license if you were doing an LMSW pursuing LC. And for that IPR, that independent practice recognition, you had 60 months, you had 5 years to do that. That is no longer the case.
Lydia's asking, should that read LMSW, not LCSW, second to the last?
Oh, yes, you're absolutely right. LCSW, you're free for all. Have at it. Own all the businesses, do all the things. That's LMSW. Great catch, Lydia. Thank you.
All right, still in 2022. You want to go first? You want me to go?
I can do it.
Do it.
So we've deleted the 3 hours of CEs for supervision theory, and you've seen 15 hours of tech, you've seen 6 hours of supervision, you've seen 3 hours of supervision. Current status is that you don't require those 3 hours of CE every 2 years in supervision theory, skills, strategies, or evaluations. And you are no longer required to indicate, it's kind of you're automatically opted in rather than opted out for your supervision status to continue, which is great. You don't have to remember to indicate, yes, I still want to do this. Please don't take me off your rolls. So that's good. And then your CE rules all got moved into one place with a new edition of the cultural competence hours, which we're currently still operating under 3 hours of cultural competence. And all of the hours that you collect are now under that 30-hour max. So you don't have to do this on top of it and this on top of it and that on top of it, creating much larger than 30 hours. Now it's 30 hours inclusive of your jurisprudence, your cultural competence, your ethics, etc., which is great. Your jurisprudence counts for 1 hour. That's really confusing because it says in different places on the website and thing, it's 2 hours or 3 hours. It is 1 hour per our rule book. And you can do one whole hour of self-study. So if you are doing self-study and that's just like I read a good book that related to my practice in social work, you can only count 1 hour of that.
All right. LPC and LMFT. So LPC just continuing, this is where all of the changes regarding them being self-employed. They can take money. They can't represent themselves as an independent practitioner. Yes, they do have to put supervised by. They just took out in the same type size and font that they had everywhere in the rules, right? So this is what I'm seeing a lot now. Well, my associate's giving a talk to a group and it's not going to have anything to do with their, practice. Well, you'd have to argue that with the board if somebody felt they were being deceived, right? You always have to think from the audience's perspective, the reader's perspective, the observer's perspective. So they use the term practice-related forms, and LMFT adopted that same language. Practice-related forms is a huge catch-all, right? But that's a tough one to kind of wiggle out of. For LMFT, the 15-hour requirement, okay. So this is interesting to me. So LMFT and social work both got that whole big CE overhaul like 6 months before LPC. So you're going to see a big gaping nothing for the next few slides because social work and LMFT in 2022 adopted all of the 50% rule. They adopted all of the self-study. They adopted all of the specifics for cultural diversity. So you'll see the LPCs do adopt it, but they don't adopt it until 2023. So I hope you guys are okay if we breeze through this. I'll go slow, but you'll see like supervisors don't need 6 additional, it's 6 included. They reduced that 15 hours, thank goodness, for LMFT. They got rid of it. I'm just going to go slow. These are all CEs. These are continuing education requirements that are acceptable. And we haven't gotten to the 50% rule. So as long as your CE is related to the practice of your license, you should be okay. So some of the new things you'll see, this ability to carry forward 10 hours, up to 10 hours. You'll see, like Ashley was talking about, the self-study. And all self-study is something you do where you don't get a certificate. And the 50% rule. So I was saving this so that you could see it. Social work, LMFT 2022, but LPC will adopt that. Okay, so the question, and Lacey, this is a really good question, and it's a really common question. So you've got a course like this one that we're doing right now, and you know it can count for ethics, and you know that it can count for supervision, let's say, right? And so that's awesome, right? But it's it's not 2 hours, right? It is 1 hour total that you can count for whatever you need. So if you need an hour for ethics, then dump it into your ethics pile. If you need it for your supervision, dump it into your supervision pile. So one training that covers both ethics and multicultural, let's say, it cannot count for both because it's not 2 hours, right? It's still a 1 hour training. Does that make sense, Lacey, or you want to unmute and ask? Oh, does the presenter have to define it? Great question. It's whatever's on your certificate. All right. I want you to think like staff, right? So if I'm a staff member and I have just audited you and I'm looking at all of your certificates and I'm counting and all I'm doing is I'm doing what I've been trained to do. I'm going to count and say, oh, they got 3 of these, 2 of those, 4 of those. All I'm looking at is your certificate. So if you go to a presentation like this one, and let's say you were expecting ethics and you look at your certificate and it doesn't say ethics on it, call the presenter and say, hey, it says on your advertisement, ethics. I need a certificate that says ethics, right? So that's what I was here for. Ashley, you want to add to that?
The only thing I would say, because we get asked this, especially by supervisees all the time. The only caveat to that I would say is if it's in the title. So sometimes it doesn't say like multicultural competence. Nearly always it's going to say ethics because that's so important. But if the title of yours is working as a diverse supervisor or learning cultural competence, if it's in the title and it's going to be in your documents and all of the things that you've kept from that training, if the certificate doesn't say it like multicultural competence specifically, because sometimes actually that does vary state by state whether that's a requirement or not, you're good. Like don't worry about that. They're going to count that if the title of it also indicates it. And same with ethics. If it says the ethics of being a culturally competent supervisor, that's a good indication that you're going to be able to count that for either one.
Okay. And sorry, just a brief second, because
Go
I know in the olden days you used to have to put like this will count as 1 hour ethics, Texas ethics. You had to like define it. So we don't have to like put that at the bottom anymore. As long as it's in the title.
Yeah, if it's a title of it and all of your materials that you're providing to your supervisees or whoever your audience is, it has ethics all over it. If you have control, if you're the presenter, please put, 1 hour of ethics at the bottom if you have control over it. But if you take a training and it's all about ethics and they don't, you can feel pretty confident the board is going to say, well, it's on the title, it's on the certificate, it's just in the title rather than like a description of the actual hour.
Okay. I think, what I was thinking as a presenter, say, like I had one where I cover ethics, supervision, and multicultural. And, if people are deciding which they want to use that for, like if I would have put this counts as 1 hour ethics, or do I put it actually counts? I don't know. It just got really confusing. So that's good to know. I can put it in the title and they can choose where it
Yeah.
goes.
And that brings up one of the things that's on the radar, and it's coming, is a CE bank. Right now, the Behavioral Health Executive Council, they're interviewing vendors who will they will hold our CEs. So as you get a CE, you upload it to the bank. And, right now, if you get the blue card, you're good to go. Renew your license. If you get the white letter, it says, oh no, your CEs are being audited, right? So honor system until you get the white letter. So they're moving to this bank though, where you will have to decide, Lacey. So it'll be like, okay, no, I'm going to count this for the ethics. And even if you go back later and you're like, oh, dang, I wish I had counted that for multicultural because I really need to pull it over here. I don't know if you'll be able to do that. So more on that coming soon. So the 50% rule in a nutshell means you as the practitioner just need to make sure half of your CEs, so LPC's 12, LMFT 15, social work 15,
15.
in a 2-year period, right? Because that's our renewal cycle, come from a certain type of provider, not a certain name, a certain type of provider. So again, I want you to think like staff. If they're going to audit you and you want to make sure that they know that the provider at Pesci or whatever was a supervisor, you're going to want to like call Pesci and say, hey, look, make sure that the word supervisor is on this certificate. Or if you go to a region 6 presentation, right? That's a school. So if that's something, make sure like region 6 is somewhere on the certificate, right? If you want staff to know what you're doing, make sure you make it very clear to them. So I think until the presenters, especially across the country, get used to this, that, oh my gosh, those Texans are asking for, are we a national organization again? We're just going to have to do some communicating so that the certificate that we have in our hand reflects what we need. And again, you're going to be uploading all of these to a bank pretty soon. So you may look at, 3 months before you renew and be like, oh crap, I don't have enough, 50% from a certain type. So this is just more information. It looks like social work is doing some different things over here. Or is that?
Yeah, we've changed a little bit. They deleted the 3 hours of supervision theory. It's back. So, this is just some more of those flip-flopperies. But for supervisors, if it's confusing at all, let me just say it out loud. Currently, August 15th, 2024, right this minute, we are required to do 6 CE hours in supervision, but that's inclusive under the 30, not on top of. So they deleted it, it came back, it's back 6 hours of supervision if you're a supervisor.
Now, if you're an author or you're a presenter, please, please pay attention to this, right? Because, and you'll see it again in a second for LPC. Don't worry, it'll hit. You get to claim hours for the work you do putting together a presentation or writing your book or reading a good book, right? No, you don't have a certificate at the end, but keep a log, right? I mean, that's what I do. I give presentations like this and I have to research to put the presentation on. So yes, I'm going to document this as one of the 5 hours putting together a presentation. And then the infamous self-study. Oops, I didn't change the social work. And again, self-study just means you didn't get a certificate. Yes, you can count prep. You can count so many things. And they will not pre-evaluate or approve anything. So yes, it is buyer beware, but I'm really hopeful that the new CE bank, will get some sort of feedback. Like it'll be like, wah, no, this one, and then you can go do another one or something like that. Okay, so Deanna, let me see if there are 2 hours given for ethics and supervision for a program. You have to pick which category you want it to count toward, unless it's spelled out. Otherwise, no, even if it's spelled out, like even if it says this certificate, there's ethics and supervision, then you have to decide which pile to put it in. Because you can't do 2 here and 2 there, because that would equal 4 hours. And it's only a 2-hour presentation. Good question. All right, here we are. We're almost there. 2023 social work. Go.
Whew. All right, dual relationships. So back in the day, there used to be this really unclear what happens when I get paid by my supervisee. I'm an external consultant for wherever they work. I get paid to supervise the person. Can I also then turn back around and hire them to see some of my clients or whatever else? So dual relationships, they really clarified this and said when the supervisor is the employer of a supervisee, you can't double bill them. So you can't charge them for supervision if you both work at the same place and you get paid by them to supervise, you can't charge the supervisee, and you can't both hire them and make them pay you at the same time. So if you hire supervisees, you have to kind of work out that, like, all right, if you see 5 people under me, then your supervision will be free or whatever else. It's a dual relationship they consider if you're kind of charging them twice for you kind of supervising them. Really confusing, but they did clarify that. And then that just says there was a complaint that actually came about with taking advantage of supervisees and making them work for you and then charging them and all those kinds of things. So if you get paid by work to supervise, you can't charge them and you can't double bill them, basically.
I was typing in the chat. Yes. Okay. So LPC, 6 hours of ethics. Okay. So LPC, you're going to start to see the exact same thing that we covered with social work and LMFT, and I'm not going to read it to you because it's going to look so familiar. LMFT was really neat. They have a new definition of family, and I thought this was great. A lot of people didn't, but the ongoing relationships outside of session. So you've got people who are in residential treatment for a long period of time. You have people in prison. You have, that they form a familial group. So I thought that was interesting. Somebody just asked this week in one of our social media groups, how come LMFT associates don't have to spell it out? And I was like, they do have to spell it out. And the practice related forms. So this is how you know Sunset is working. This is how you know BHEC is working, because everybody's communicating, right? It used to be just so bizarre and everything was just so different. And like they were in these, I don't know, different countries. But now we see people saying, oh, no, that makes sense. If LPCs have to do it, LPC associates, then yeah, LMFT associates should have to do it as well. Anything you want to add there?
No, that was just a holdover from COVID that they just, if there's another declared disaster, that they're going to make some exceptions for who can get licensed.
Okay.
Hopefully we will have a nice 100 years before the next declared disaster.
No kidding. So LMFT had another interesting thing. 2023 was interesting, kind of like 2022 was for LPC. So we got a letter and basically it said, as of today, all LMFT associate license will expire February 29th, 2028. You know, leap year, right? Because it was a leap year. And so that's because LMFT was going to structure their associate license just like LPC, right? No more confusion, no more 3 renewals, adding up to 7 years, unless you needed more family hours, and then you could roll, I mean, all the things, right? And so LMFT associate license expire at 60 months, just like LPC associate licenses. And so if you happen to have an LMFT associate in 2023, you might look at their license because it expires February 29th, 2028. Okay, let me go here. And this is just, you guys are seeing, this is the LPC board catching up with social work and LMFT regarding CEs. That's all this is.
All right. And there's a question about LPC associates saying LPCA and not listing their supervisors in marketing.
Okay. So what we're finding is Psychology Today, because it's a national platform, doesn't really care about Texas rules. And so we've had a lot of conversations around this because Psychology Today, there's no place to put it, or it's not easy to put supervised by. And so making sure just somewhere predominantly in the text that they're putting supervised by. But websites, there's no excuse. In fact, I saw one the other day, it was in a just, regional thread like Austin or San Antonio, or one of the threads on Facebook. And somebody's like, hey, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm such and such LPCA, and my practice is this. And I go to their website and no mention of a supervisor. And I'm like, and it's just something that we have to continually educate ourselves and our colleagues, but it is not allowed. Can you restate the dual relationship? If you hire LPC associate, they pay for supervision. Okay, so Dr. Hernandez, that was actually social work. That was Ashley talking about a rule that social work had with dual relationships. We don't have anything like that, and you're probably aware that it's basically just, our LPC associates aren't hiring their supervisor. They're paying them for professional services. So I know it seems like a very fine line. And Lydia, that's a great idea. The LPCS that I know instruct their associates to write it in the text box for Psychology Today. Yes. Okay, good. And see, Kendra and Lydia, this is how we learn that stuff, right? So if our associates are saying, nah, I can't do it, we can say, no, I was just in a CE the other day and I learned how to do it.
If you want to eat that.
Okay. So LPCs, I'm going slow here, but I am walking through the 50% rule, the types of providers. Oh, I was not. I was doing the types of CEs. I'm sorry. And just a side note, remember the human trafficking course is not a BHEC LPC LMFT social worker psychology requirement. They simply they emphasize it and they draw attention to it because it's a state licensing requirement. Everybody in Texas who holds a license has to take that course. And so, yes, it is in our rules. And they will accept it as a CE, right? But that's why that's the only CE that has an approved provider. Like you just can't take any sex trafficking course. You have to take it from a Health and Human Services, Texas Health and Human Services approved provider. That's because it's not in our BHEC or member board area at all.
And this is one of the things about CEs, like most of the CEs are in one place and sex trafficking is somewhere else, which is why I think it trips so many people up. They're looking in that list of CEs and sex trafficking isn't that the comment about sex trafficking isn't there. It's actually in the beginning because it applies to all 4 member boards. So that's just I'm always like Control F for find in the rule book. Type in sex. There's, I think, 2 exact hits, and it's both about that sex trafficking course. And it's just in a different section, which is confusing.
Yeah, and in this PowerPoint, it does have where that is, but I'm not going to go back to that. Okay, 2023, another important thing that happened with LPC is if you work somewhere where you can't get the patient, the client, the prisoner, the whatever to sign, or they've already signed a bunch of paperwork, you can get their consent without having them sign. They can give you an assent, like they can nod their head, they can say yes, but you do have to document that they consented to treatment. And then this, I think, comes up later with social work, and maybe we already did this with social work, but with LMFT, that if you work for somebody, you may not have to be the records custodian. I want to be real careful here because I'm going to read it. Records created by licensee during the scope of employment with an agency or institution must be maintained by the licensee unless it's maintained by the employer. How are you going to know that? You got to ask. You got to look at your contract. If you're a supervisor, you have to ask your associates to ask, right? Because they're allowed to be records custodians now. And so with this rule, this either or, you need some clarification because I've had a couple of instances where people like the thing went out of business or we received a subpoena. And what do I do? Am I responsible for the 7 years? LMFT, because it's a 60-month no renewal, they don't need CEs anymore. Sorry, let me clarify that. LMFT associates, because it's a 60-month no renewal, they don't need continuing education. Okay, question, if an LPC associate, also a certified school counselor, is offering a growth group at their school, are they required to have the supervised by note? Great question. Yes. And I guess why not? You know what I mean? And I know that's schools can be different. That's why I'm hemming and hawing a little bit because I know in the scope of their work as a certified school counselor, those kiddos aren't necessarily their clients, right? But they want to accrue direct hours from that group. So if I was the supervisor, I would say absolutely yes. Put your name, supervised by. But if you're in the Texas Supervisor Coalition Facebook page, that is a great question to ask in that group because we have a lot of supervisors who work in school settings in that group. This is about pending complaints. It's a BHEC rule. I will let you guys read that on your own. Here we are, 2024. This is what you've all been waiting for, but we covered all the good stuff. So BHEC. Oh, this is the most confusing sentence in the history of the world. Because what it's referring to is when you're counseling your client and they go to New York for the summer. So this paragraph, what it says in legalese is the minute you start talking to that client in New York, Texas says, hey, guess what? You're not counseling anymore. We have no jurisdiction here. And everybody took that to mean like, well, yay, we can counsel across state lines now. You got to check with New York. You still got to check with where your client's feet are. All right, so this was 2024 when they basically said, we only care where your feet are, or I'm sorry, where the client's feet are, not yours. That's why we have all those cool Facebook groups like Traveling Therapists, and why Dr. Ashley and I can go all over the country and do what we do, right? Because, you know, our clients are where they belong. They're in the state where we're licensed. Our feet are in other places. So it depends on your license, though. I mean, Ashley, you have 5 different licenses. They may all be different, right?
They are all different.
Oh, and social work. Are you going to talk about that? Because social work doesn't want you to counsel when you're out of the state, right?
It depends on the state law,
Okay.
and many of them, obviously because of COVID. But
Yeah.
the other really interesting thing about that legalese document is, and they really clarified this on one of those like insights over the lunch hour, was in the, not actually in the rule books, but in the FAQs on the board website. There was a question like, I'm traveling as, you know, just a human, as a provider of services. I'm in Texas visiting family or in the military or whatever, seeing the sites. Do I have to be licensed in Texas in order to see my client who remains in Ohio, Vermont, New Hampshire? And Texas said yes in the FAQs. This in March of 24, they did away with that because why would they be regulating that? That's crazy pants. So they also took away that like you can travel. So all of your friends who want to come visit you that are therapists too, they don't have to get licensed in Texas in order to be here for vacation.
That would be weird.
It was insane.
All right. There's a rule you can add your doctoral degree, but it's $54. So they added to BHEC, we always knew this, the duty to update your name and address. And this is new. It's not, but I will tell you, this is one thing we see teaching the supervisor course, that people are being asked to do this if they've never done it before. So if you've been licensed like 10 years and you'd go to upgrade to supervisor or submit for your designation, and they're like, oh, we need you to do an MPDB self-query. And you're like, what is that? I think their goal is just to make sure every licensed person has to fill this out at least one time in their career. Yes, I can go back to the doctoral degree. If you want to add your doctoral degree, you can add it, but they're charging money. I just didn't put the fee here, but it's in the rules. I believe it's $54 if you want to get a new license with your PhD on it.
And for social work, this might be a little more relevant, or if you get a doctorate, that is something not in your license field. So I got a doctorate in industrial and organizational psychology. I can go into my account and request that they recognize that I have a doctoral degree, but it will never change my license type because there is no licensing for IO psychologists. I can't become a psychologist. I didn't take a clinical program. So if you have a doctorate of anything, if specifically for social work, an LCSW is your terminal degree. There's nothing higher than that. There's other distinctions you can do nationally and those kinds of things. But for the state of Texas, it's the highest level other than supervisor, which isn't necessarily higher, just different. So doctorate doesn't change your license type. It just, you're recognizing it from the board and you pay a little fee to do that. Up to you. Take it or leave it.
Just some time limits for bringing complaints. $54 if you try to get your money refunded for fees. I remember that was a proposed rule. I thought that was weird, but it's a rule now. Ashley, don't know what that is.
Yeah, so 781.412 for the social workers. You had this, we talked a little bit earlier about that you had 2 years from when you passed the national LCSW exam to when you had to say, I'm ready to upgrade my license, or else you had to kind of start all over. That is no longer the case. You can take as long as you need to do that. It will no longer expire. You could have taken the test 10 years ago and never gone and actually upgraded your license from LM to LC. It's all good.
I'm looking up, I just want to be sure. NPDB stands for National Provider Database. And if you Google that, you could see how to do the self-query. So if you haven't done that, or if you've been asked to do that, or you've been audited, you can Google that and get that done. Just don't open the envelope. That's what I did. I had
And
to sit in the house and
please
open
do
the
it.
envelope.
That changed in our laws, and I can't tell you when it was, but you can just send the PDF. That takes 15 minutes. You don't have to get it mailed to you any longer. That was a change that's in the rule books. And Deanna, if you get audited, you have to do it again. So it does say in our rules, because the National Provider Database is a live, like the point of it is it's a current right this second look at every license you have in the entire country and whether there's any red flags or disciplinary hearings or anything else. So if you've been audited, you will have to do it again to say, as of this moment, even if you did it 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And that's to make sure that, like, if there's been some things going on recently, that they catch it today.
Yeah, and there's no telling, that's something that's changing all the time. So, it could be we have in a new legislative year, Texas or the Congress passes something else, so they may want us to do it more often. There's no telling, but right now it's one and done, just like your fingerprinting. All right, so 2024, the 50% rule went into effect. They removed the 5-year expiration for the NCE and the NCMHCE, and LMFT started to mirror in that they defined independent practice as needing a supervisor. And they increased finally the number of hours that LMFT associates could accrue with technology, which was such a great thing because, I love technology. Now, proposed rules. Remember, these sneak up on us, but if you get emails, you will know when the 30-day comment period is. I make comments all the time, and it's a Google form, right? So it's not like you have to be super, wordy and creative and all these things. You go in, you fill out the Google form, and you say, hey, I like this rule because, or hey, I think this is a dumb rule, and here's why. And they read every single comment. They don't read it in open board meetings, but they read your comments. It matters because the rules committee, I don't think those rules committee are public anymore. They'll come out and they'll say, hey, look, here's some rules we came up with. But if you're not on the ball and you're not aware of the 30-day rule, I know on the Texas Supervisor Coalition Facebook page, I'll put it out all the time. Okay, we got 29 days to comment on these rules. And it's nice. They also publish it in the Texas Register, but that is the worst document on the planet. And I'm so glad I didn't go to law school every time I read that because it's awful. The print is tiny. It's hard to read. The 4-year rules review, the time to comment has passed, but you can propose a new rule. So if, you're seeing this presentation tonight and there's something that you think is absolutely ridiculous or we're leaving out, go to the website, go to BHEC, go to rules, and it'll say, here's how you can propose a rule. I know I've done that too. So, any more questions? Ashley, anything you want to tag on at the end here?
I don't think so. Thank y'all that's a lot of questions. Ended this oh, Marlene, can you let us know what profession? That's one of the things you see these national groups on Facebook and everyone's like, doesn't say their state and doesn't say their profession. You're like, I don't know, it depends. So yeah, just let us know what profession, LPC, LMFT, social work.
So if you have ended the relationship with your supervisor, they will need to, the rule is they need to submit within 30 days all of your hours. But I highly recommend that you also, and in fact, this is what I'm hearing more and more is that the associate is submitting those hours too. So right now, Marlene, I hate to tell you, I'm not really sure. I'm hearing snail mail is the only way right now. There may be a way. Anybody out there want to unmute and tell me is there something updated, or do folks still have to send it via snail mail? Yeah, it changes all the time, Marlene. So what I would do if I were you is I would definitely do make copies of everything, submit it snail mail. And if there's a spot online, it won't hurt if you do it there too. Lydia's asking about the rule. I think I might have skipped that. Let me.
Students.
Yeah.
So are you talking about the CEs, like what you can count as CEs for teaching, supervising? Yeah. Okay. So let me give you the exact language around that. All right. So we're in 781 point. Why are you still scrolling, guy? I told you to stop. It's fun for us. Yeah, 781.501. So the specific area that you're going to look for is subsection H, number 7. It says providing field or practicum instruction to social work students. You can claim 1 hour of CE credit for each hour of college credit. So if the class is 3 hours, you get 3 hours of CEs. If it's 4, you get 4. If it's 1, you get 1. And the maximum number that you can do that if you teach 3 or 4 practicum or internship classes is 10 per renewal period. You can't count it towards ethics, cultural diversity, or competency, cultural competency or cultural diversity. So let me just say that's H and number 7 is that specific rule. But yeah, if you're teaching some classes, you can count some of that work, which is absolutely great. You can also count the separately, that was just for practicum in field. Number 4 of that same list is teaching or attending. So if you're auditing a class or you're just, professional development or just feel like going back to school, you can also count attending a university or college level course. And the maximum for that is 5 hours. And it's the same. How many credit hours is how many hours you get to count.
Yeah. So y'all look at that. I mean, LPCs and LMFTs who are doc students, go in there and see what you can count for CEs. All right. So while we're winding up here, don't leave yet. I want you to go to the chat. And if you have not done so already, I want you to click the link. And if it looks like I've posted it, but there are a couple me's in here. So that me has posted the Google Doc, click it. Because if you don't fill out the Google Doc, we cannot send you a certificate, all right? You don't have to go there now. You don't have to fill it out, but just remember when I close the meeting, that goes away. Oh, good. We got an answer about the question about where to submit hours. Will licensees being audited be notified on the blue card? Nope. If you get a blue card, that is a no audit. If you get a white letter, the white letter with your renewal means that you've been chosen to be audited. And hopefully with that CE bank, that'll all go away.
I think Marlene, a couple comments back, said that you have to wait 30 days to add a new supervisor. Do you know?
No, with LPC and LMFT, they can overlap. And so, yeah, she can add it as quickly as possible because LPC and LMFT associates can't practice without supervision. So, and if you add your supervisor quickly, hopefully, fingers crossed, staff would backdate it, but it's not a bad idea to keep both supervisors at the same time until you look at your online record and you see with your own eyes, okay, your new supervisor's listed.
Right. I already have it's because I have two supervisors, which was the one at my job and another one that I was seeing for like the business aspect of things because I'm wanting to launch my own private practice.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that was there for the business aspect and the other trainings that I want to take, she's gonna stay in my records, but the one from my previous job is gonna be removed. So now I have a third supervisor who is waiting to become my second supervisor of record. But since you mentioned that I have to wait 30 days, or not that I have to wait, but the supervisor has 30 days to submit my hours.
Yeah, just tell them to pick up the pace. Tell them to do it quicker because once they get that paperwork and notification from the supervisor, they can do it in 24 hours.
Okay. So it's just a matter of me speaking to my former supervisor, or who's going to be my former supervisor, to send in the paperwork quickly.
Yes, you got it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so this will be an instructional video. The replay it's going to appear in our 2025 40-hour supervisor training course. And what we will absolutely do, your face will not appear, I promise you. But what we may have trouble doing is editing out these very, very excellent questions. And I love the questions. And so I would ask that if you unmuted and you do not want your voice to appear in a Kate Walker training production, which I don't blame you, it's absolutely okay. If you would just send me an email and let me know, say, please don't put my voice, because we can edit your voice out. If your face is appearing and I can see your face, obviously, don't worry. We are not putting anybody's face in this video except Ashley's and mine. So rest assured. Any other questions about anything, about the housekeeping, about our next webinars, about the rules, anything? If we can't answer it, we will find somebody who can. So we have a couple of Facebook groups. We have a group just for supervisors called the Texas Supervisor Coalition. And when you request to join, you'll have to provide your license number because our admins check to make sure you're actually a supervisor. The other Facebook group is called Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, and that's open to anybody at any stage of their counseling or social work dream. We just want you in. We want you asking questions. Oh, and there's the link. Thanks, Ashley. All right, I think we're heading to the end here. So your CE tonight will be 1.5 CEs for ethics. And I believe we're counting this for supervision as well, because we've talked about supervision a whole bunch. And we would love it if you guys would spread the word that the social work 40-hour training course will be going live probably in the next month or so. Ashley and I are really excited that we can offer this to social workers. So thank you so much for your endorsement, and thanks for coming out on a Wednesday night and doing something amazing for your career. And you guys know the rules now, so spread the word, go do good things, make sure everybody else is minding their P's and Q's as well. And thank you, Dr. Ashley, for being here. I'm So excited to be partnering with you. I've said excited a lot. I'm Dr. Kate Walker. This is a Kate Walker Training production. And you guys come back for our next presenter, Dr. Patrice Dunn, and she will be here September 25th, free. All right. Bye, guys. Have a
Okay.
wonderful evening.